Disappointed at the change in orders, Commander Marcus Vance clenched his right fist. He stared at the glowing text on the datapad, the sterile bureaucratic font mocking the reality of the situation they had just barely survived. It read, United Earth Expeditionary Force, High Command. Subject, Asset Requisition Denial, Sector 4G Dark. Decrypted text, Commander Vance. Your request for heavy Class V automated mining extractors and military-grade containment frigates has been denied. Given the discovery of a macro-engineered construct, Dyson core, jurisdiction has been transferred from logistics to the scientific command. A flotilla of research vessels, led by the science cruiser Archimedes, is currently in transit. Your orders are to secure the perimeter and prepare for their arrival. Marcus let out a slow, measured breath. He squeezed his right hand harder, digging his fingernails into his palm. It took exactly 0.04 seconds too long for the fingers to respond to his brain's command. To a civilian, 0.04 seconds was nothing. It was less than the blink of an eye. To a Tier 1 United Earth Recon Marine, it was the difference between a pulse laser missing your helmet and boiling your brain inside your skull. He looked down at his arm. Beneath the heavy fabric of his UEF uniform, the limb was physically flawless. There were no scars, no tattoos, no blemishes. The skin was smooth, the muscle tone mathematically perfect. It was a masterpiece of modern cellular regeneration, and he hated it. The slight delay, that ghost in the biological machine, sent a cold shiver up his spine. The sterile hum of the Gerfalcon's command deck faded away, replaced by the deafening, bone-rattling roar of orbital artillery and the smell of burning ozone. His mind violently snapped back 3 years. The Caliban Rift. 3 years prior. They called it the Slaughterhouse. It was a massive, hollowed-out asteroid base situated in the chaotic gravity eddies of the Caliban Rift. It belonged to the Vartok, a brutal, hulking species of pirates who had ambushed a Council civilian liner, dragging hundreds of hostages into their subterranean fortress. The Council had debated for weeks on how to negotiate. The United Earth Expeditionary Force hadn't bothered. They sent the 7th Recon Battalion. Captain Marcus Vance was 28 years old, at the absolute apex of human physical conditioning. His original body was a temple built by a decade of relentless, punishing combat drops. His bones were microfractured and healed so many times they were as dense as concrete. His nervous system was a superhighway of myelinated fibers, honed to react to danger before his conscious mind even registered it. Breach and fight. Marcus barked over the squad comms, his voice steady over the violent shaking of the insertion pod. Beside him, Sergeant Miller, still fully biological back then, was priming a heavy thermobaric charge. Charge is hot, Cap. We hit the hull. I blow the lock. We go and fast. We move like ghosts, Marcus reminded the 6 Marines strapped into the pod. The Vartok rely on brute force and thermal optics. We pop smoke, drop the ambient temperature, and cut their Achilles tendons before they know we're in the room. Nobody stops moving. With a sickening crunch, the insertion pod slammed into the rocky exterior of the asteroid base. The inertial dampeners whined as gravity abruptly shifted. Blow it, Marcus yelled. Miller slammed the detonator. The pod's front ramp vanished in a blinding flash of white-hot plasma. Marcus was the first one out. He didn't just run, he flowed. His right leg drove into the deck plating with explosive power, launching him through the jagged breach and into the sprawling, dimly lit atrium of the pirate stronghold. 3 Vartok guards, standing over 7 feet tall and clad in heavy scrap metal armor, turned toward the explosion, raising their heavy scatter cannons. They never got the chance to pull their triggers. Marcus hit the deck and went into a slide, his right arm snapping up with his sidearm. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots, perfectly placed between the heavy armor plates of their necks. His hand-eye coordination was supernatural. He felt the exact weight of the trigger, the recoil traveling up his forearm, his muscles perfectly counteracting the kick to keep the barrel dead level. Clear, Marcus shouted, already on his feet and moving toward the next blast door. Miller, get this door open. For 20 minutes, the 7th Recon tore through the asteroid like a localized hurricane. They moved with a fluidity and lethal grace that the hulking alien pirates simply could not process. Marcus was a dancer of death, leading his squad through zero-gravity maintenance shafts and heavily fortified corridors. He felt every vibration in the floor, his original limbs acting as finely tuned sensors that read the battlefield perfectly. Then, they reached the core containment block where the hostages were held. They breached the final door, spilling into a massive, cavernous hangar bay. Suspended in cages above a molten thermal vent were the Council civilians, mostly frail, easily terrified species. Perimeter secure, Miller yelled, moving toward the primary control terminal to lower the cages. Wait, Marcus said, his instincts screaming. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The room was too quiet. The air pressure was wrong. Miller stepped back. From the shadows of the hangar ceiling, a massive, unclassified shape dropped to the deck. The impact cracked the floor plating. It wasn't a Vartok pirate. It was an automated defense rig, a massive, quadrupedal walker built from stolen, heavily modified military hardware. It bristled with rotary cannons, but its primary weapon was an industrial-grade thermal shear beam mounted on its chin, designed to cut through battleship hulls. Contact! Marcus roared, raising his rifle. The walker's AI targeting system shrieked, a high-pitched electronic wail, and opened fire. The air filled with a hailstorm of tungsten rounds. Spread out. Break its tracking, Marcus ordered, diving behind a massive steel shipping crate. The squad scattered, returning fire, but their standard-issue armor-piercing rounds merely sparked harmlessly off the walker's reinforced sloped armor. Miller was caught in the open, sprinting for cover. The walker pivoted, tracking him. "Miller, get down," Marcus yelled. The walker didn't use its guns. It lunged forward with terrifying speed, sweeping one of its massive hydraulic legs in a wide arc. The metallic limbs slammed into Miller, throwing him 30 feet across the hangar like a rag doll. Miller crashed into a bulkhead, his right arm pinned and visibly crushed beneath a collapsed steel beam. "Cap, I'm pinned," Miller screamed over the comms, blood pooling around his shoulder. The walker turned its chassis toward the trapped engineer. A deep, resonant hum began to vibrate through the hangar as the chin-mounted thermal shear beam began to spool up, glowing with a blinding, sun-like intensity. It was preparing to vaporize Miller entirely. Marcus didn't think. He didn't weigh the odds. His natural biology, wired for instantaneous, sacrificial action to protect the pack, took over. He broke cover, sprinting directly at the massive machine. "Hey, ugly," he roared, firing his rifle directly into the walker's optical sensor cluster. The walker's AI instantly recalibrated, assessing Marcus as the higher, more immediate threat. The machine pivoted its massive chassis, the thermal beam glowing a violent, incandescent purple. Marcus calculated the timing perfectly. He planted his right foot, preparing to execute a high-velocity lateral vault that would carry him out of the beam's path and put him close enough to plant a thermal grenade under the walker's vulnerable neck joint. He launched himself. His right leg coiled and exploded with force, pushing him airborne. His right arm pulled back, the grenade primed in his hand. But the walker wasn't just a machine. It had a predictive algorithm. As Marcus jumped, the machine didn't track his current position. It tracked his trajectory. The thermal shear beam fired. It was silent. There was no explosion, no concussive shockwave. Just a sudden, blinding flash of purple light that washed over the right side of Marcus's body. He didn't feel pain. Not at first. The heat was so absolute, so beyond the capacity of human nerve endings to process, that it simply registered as a massive, jarring impact. Marcus hit the deck hard, tumbling uncontrollably. He tried to roll back onto his feet, sending the command to his right arm to push off the floor and to his right leg to plant. Nothing happened. He collapsed heavily onto his chest. Confused, Marcus turned his head. The steel decking where he had just been in the air was glowing orange, a deep trench cut directly through the solid metal. Then he looked down at himself. His right arm was gone, sheared off cleanly mid-bicep. His right leg was gone, amputated violently just below the hip. The wounds were cauterized instantly by the plasma, leaving blackened, smoking craters of flesh where his limbs used to be. The biological shock hit him a second later. The universe seemed to tilt on its axis. The edges of his vision tunneled into black. A profound, Overwhelming cold washed over his torso as his heart struggled to pump blood through a circulatory system that had just been catastrophically truncated. Die, his brain whispered. Go to sleep. The walker towered above him, its rotary cannons spinning up to finish the job. But humanity didn't evolve by dying quietly in the dark. A primal, savage fury erupted from the deepest, oldest part of Marcus's brain. He refused to die on this dirty rock. He refused to let Miller die. Using only his left arm, Marcus grabbed the deck plating, his fingers tearing until they bled, and dragged his mangled, half-destroyed body forward. The walker's cannons began to fire, chewing up the deck inches from his face. The thermal grenade was still gripped in his severed right hand, lying on the deck 3 feet away. Marcus lunged. He grabbed his own severed hand with his left arm, prying the live grenade from the dead fingers. He bit down on the arming pin with his teeth and ripped his head backward, pulling the pin free. With a roar of pure, unadulterated defiance, Marcus threw the grenade straight up into the walker's open cooling intake just as the machine stepped over him. He didn't even cover his head. He just watched. Thump! The muffled explosion occurred deep inside the walker's chassis. The machine shuddered violently, its internal pressure spiking. A second later, the core detonated, blowing the walker apart in a rain of shrapnel and burning hydraulic fluid. Marcus lay on the deck, breathing heavily, staring at the ceiling of the hangar as Miller's frantic voice and the boots of medics rushed toward him. He closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. He woke up in the stark white sterile environment of the UEF primary medical station. Beside him in the ward was Miller. The engineer was sitting up, reading a datapad, his right arm amputated at the shoulder. "You're awake, Cap," Miller said softly. "Yeah," Marcus croaked, his throat dry. "Hostages. Safe. All of them." Miller tapped his stump. "Docs gave us a choice. Cybernetics or the regrowth fats. I'm taking the metal arm. I like machines. They do what you tell them to." "Regrowth," Marcus said without hesitation. "I want my body back." But he never got it back. Not really. 6 months in the nutrient vats. 6 months of excruciating, agonizing cellular division. When he finally stepped out, his right arm and leg were whole. They looked identical to the ones he had lost. But the first time he tried to catch a tossed ball in physical therapy, it hit him in the chest. "It's the myelination," the chief medical officer had explained, looking at his test results with a sympathetic grimace. "Your original limbs had nearly 30 years of muscle memory. The nerve pathways were insulated by decades of impact and repetition, allowing for microsecond twitch responses. These new limbs, biologically, they are infantile. They are structurally sound, but the neural latency is 0.04 seconds slower. I can train them," Marcus had argued, his jaw set. "I'll do the drills." "Commander, you are Tier 1. In your line of work, 0.04 seconds is dead. If you deploy in combat with that latency, you won't survive the first drop, and you'll get your squad killed. I'm sorry. I have to pull your active combat status." Marcus had shattered a medical monitor with his left hand. 2 weeks later, UEF Command called him in. "You're too slow for recon, Vance. But your brain is sharp. You survived the Caliban rift through pure tactical grit. We need that mind. We're moving you to expeditionary logistics. You're going to keep the fleet moving." It felt like a burial. Present day, the Gerfalcon. Marcus exhaled slowly, the memory of the burning plasma fading from his mind. He unclenched his right fist. He flexed the pristine, flawless, slightly too slow fingers. Logistics. For 3 years, he had coordinated supply lines, fuel transfers, and engineering deployments. It was vital work, but it lacked the bleeding edge of the frontier. But as he looked out the reinforced viewport at the dark sphere, the silent, ancient god machine that had almost killed them all just hours prior, a grim realization settled over him. High Command thought this was a science project. They were sending an armada of unarmed research vessels, full of eager, brilliant minds who had never smelled burning plasma. They were going to poke and prod a hyper-advanced alien containment core with the cosmic equivalent of a stick. They were going to wake it up, and when they did, they would be slaughtered. Grand Archivist Collins stepped up beside him, the insectoid aliens still looking visibly shaken from their escape. "Commander Vance, the sensors indicate that Archimedes' flotilla will arrive in 48 standard hours. Do we have the infrastructure to support their scientific endeavor? Marcus looked at the flawless, infantile flesh of his right hand, and then down at the datapad. He highlighted the rejection order from command and deleted it. Colin, Marcus said, his voice dropping into the cold, flat register he hadn't used since the Caliban Rift. The scientists are coming to read the history of this place, but they have no idea what it takes to survive it. What are you proposing? Colin asked, his antennae twitching nervously. Logistics now, Marcus said, a dangerous smile touching the corners of his mouth. And if Command won't send me the military assets I requested, I'm just going to have to build them myself. Get Miller on the line. Tell him to start stripping the Gerfalcon's reactor plating. We're going to fortify this rock before the eggheads get here.